Welcome, this is Hashtag Gen Z, a podcast that explores Generation Z, who they are, how they're different from other generations, while also being an incredible blend of those who came before them. We explore what they think is cool, what moves them, and why they do what they do. I'm your host, Megan Grace, and it is so nice to have you here. This is episode 53, where we're exploring Gen Z mindsets as it relates to work. This has kind of been a theme throughout the entire season 6 so far. However, this is going to think a little bit more about the mindsets and expectations that Gen Z brings to work. What we think about work and what we expect from work can have profound impacts on the companies we seek employment from and the levels of energy we're willing to invest into our work. And it's no shock, Gen Z is going to differ into the ways that they're looking at their job search and their early career expectations and bringing different perspectives than previous generations. The perspectives that Gen Z is taking into the job search and the workplace start long before submitting a resume or showing up to new employee orientation and onboarding. The job search is starting earlier, and the expectations of companies is arguably higher among this cohort. Quantifying these perspectives is something that I'm always interested in, but I can't do all the research myself, which is why I'm excited for this episode's guest to share more about a recent study that was done to capture the perspectives of Gen Z college students on a variety of topics, including what they think about work, how they're seeking out jobs, and what they expect of companies and organizations. In this episode, I'm joined by Christina Sugimoto, who works with Wasserman NextGen. The Wasserman team connects with businesses with Gen Z and millennial consumers through custom research, peer-to-peer, social and digital, experiential and media, and community integration strategies. Christina has worked on a variety of different projects with brand ambassador, NIL influencer, and experiential projects for Comcast and the Xfinity HBC Tour, Kentucky, Intuit TurboTax, and Dunkin'. She manages the day-to-day of ambassadors and influencers in various programs. And prior to her current role, she worked as a creative intern at Wasserman NextGen and an art direction intern at BBDO, New York. She's a cum laude graduate of Emerson College, holding a BS in Marketing Communications with a concentration on creative design and a minor in psychology. In her spare time, you can find her at the beach soaking in the sunshine in San Diego or indulging in some 5-star pasta and oysters in Boston's North End. Christina brings so many great insights to the conversation, so let's get into it. Excited to welcome Christina to the conversation today to share more about what Wasserman NextGen is doing and the great work that they're producing as it relates to understanding generations. It's always wonderful when I can find people that like to nerd out about similar stuff, and it seems like we've made a match. So Christina, welcome to the conversation. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
Well, Christina, you're really what people are here to listen to. So tell me a little bit more about your story. Kind of what is it that you do and what is the journey that you took to kind of doing the work that you do with Wasserman NextGen?
Yeah, so in my role, I am an associate manager of accounts here at Wasserman NextGen. So essentially, I handle the day-to-day of managing our brand ambassadors and influencers for various programs that we have for our clients. But I also work on some experiential marketing activations for brands as well. Some of the really cool brands that I've worked on in the past or have contributed to include Comcast, TurboTax, Dunkin'. So pretty big names, which is really cool for me to experience as someone so young in the industry. But as far as how I got started, I studied marketing communications at Emerson College. And I had a focus on creative design. So a lot of the work that I did in college sort of was around that space. So I dabbled a lot in social media, graphic design, and it eventually led me to land an internship in art direction at BBDO New York, which is an advertising agency. And I really enjoyed the creativity of that and the brainstorming aspect of being an art direction intern, and knew that that was the path that I eventually wanted to go on. And then in my last semester of senior year in college, I found an internship at Wasserman NextGen, and I was a creative intern for my last semester of college. And in this internship, I worked to brainstorm and doing creative ideation for clients. And it was really exciting because it was a completely different side than the traditional advertising space, where we were marketing specifically to college students. So as a college student myself at the time, it was really exciting for me to be in that space. And then from there, I found interest on the account side of things and got to sit in on a bunch of account meetings, which was really exciting. And then eventually, when this role opened up, obviously I applied and I got this job right after graduating in December of 2022. So I started in January last year, and I have been going strong ever since.
Well, it's wonderful. It sounds like the thread through your experience is like understanding your target audience, right? And I'm not in advertising, but I know enough that like you got to know who you're trying to communicate with, right? And I feel like we're going to get into that. But can you share a little bit more about what Wasserman NextGen is and what is NextGen really striving to do to help others understand and work with Gen Z?
So NextGen focuses on helping other brands really reach that audience. And so we hold an annual student census that helps us sort of gain insight into the behaviors and habits of Gen Z and what they're really interested in all aspects of their life. So our 2023 census asked around 1,000 students in college in the US and in Canada questions about, their school life, their personal life at home, their interests, how they engage with brands, things like that. And we use that information to create these programs so that brands can really resonate with this audience and, drive really great brand affinity and just keep the consumers engaged for a really long time.
So I think that those insights are really important. And we're going to definitely get to that aspect of what your census and the kind of that study does, along with kind of like keeping a pulse through the data. What are some ways that you all are working with brands to understand, I mean, right now, Gen Z, some millennial, and a bit of Gen Alpha, but give us some examples. I know you talked about some of the clients that you worked with, and you don't have to give away all their secrets. But aside from providing some of the insights to those companies, what are some ways in which you're helping others better work with Gen Z?
Yeah. So based on our census data and all of our insights, and also what the client is looking for, it obviously varies from brand and company just based on what they're looking for like KPIs. And so we curate programs based on their needs and utilize those insights to back it up wide.
Wonderful. That's fantastic to hear a little bit more about the work that you all do to help brands and in some ways bridge the gaps, right? Like they want consumers. You all are helping them understand their consumers and how to work with them. A big piece of that, we already kind of teased, is that study that you mentioned. I would love to learn more about the study that you all conducted with recent Gen Z college students and really what are some of the key findings of that new study? What are the things that we need to pay attention to from that?
Yeah, we asked them a lot of different questions about their lives, but the 5 main key takeaways from this census last year is that there's a lot of changes happening. So there's changes in the way that Gen Z measures success. There's a lot of changes in living situations, screen time, brand engagement, and investing, specifically about money. So I can dive into a couple of those points now. In terms of like measuring success, Gen Z has shifted their interests and focuses a lot since COVID happened. So during the COVID lockdown specifically, students had a more defined idea of college success in the sense that a lot of people valued happiness and fulfillment, and academic achievement was on the lower end. But in our census from last year, we saw the top choice was still happiness and fulfillment at 15%, but academic achievement is a lot higher at 11%. And so we can see in a post-COVID world that students actually care a lot about their academic achievement, but regardless, brands should be encouraged to, find solutions that propel student success, and students, define that on their own terms. So just being able to adapt to that. In terms of living situations, we found that 21% of the people that were surveyed still live at home with their families. And so this obviously has a big shift in consumer needs and what they purchase. And for example, if you live at home, you might have greater commuting needs. So you might pay, insurance, you might have car payments rather than someone who lives in an apartment on campus. They are obviously paying rent and groceries and all that kind of stuff. So a little bit of shift there. Another thing I mentioned was screen time and brand engagement. So this one kind of scares me because I definitely see myself in this space, but 84% of the people surveyed spend 4+ hours per day on their phone or mobile device. And 39 of those people that responded said that the volume is over 7 hours. And I can definitely say that I found myself in that group, a couple times throughout the week. And it's really interesting because even though the screen time is really high, social media is not necessarily like the primary way to reach Gen Z digitally, which is really interesting because a lot of people use it for socializing with their friends and to pass the time when they're bored rather than looking for, things to purchase or things like that. So that's really interesting. And people always say that like Gen Z has like a really short attention span. And I feel like that definitely like sometimes may be true, but I think as generations like evolved, you just have to reach them in different ways. And so I feel like if people are trying to reach them, like you just need to earn our attention in new ways and with new kinds of stories, and utilizing technology is a good way to do that, but adding different perspectives and, connecting with communities rather than a generation as a whole is really important since all of us are so different. And then lastly, I mentioned investing, specifically about money. And so what's really interesting about our census data is that 39 of the people that we surveyed currently invest in some capacity, but a lot of people don't understand how it works, or 54% were interested but had no resources to start. And so I think with our current economy, Gen Z is really, wanting to understand their finances, especially with inflation and all of those things going on, but are really unsure how to start. And so strategic brands have a really great opportunity to guide and really bring to light all the great ways to like invest your money to Gen Z to really bring them to the point that they want to be at. Because I definitely fall in that group where, I want to invest in more, but I don't necessarily know how. And so I think like if a brand really wants to reach this audience, it's like understanding that is definitely helpful, especially if you're in like the finance space looking to connect with this generation.
Christina, thank you for that. I mean, I could sit and gobble up stats for days. So I appreciated that fully. I think there's so much to really explore with that, because while you are capturing insights of college students are just pre-employees, if you will, right? Like their next step usually in life is either grad school or they're going to go work somewhere. And eventually even grad students go work somewhere. And so I think there's a lot that companies specifically that are working to want to attract this new generation in terms of potentially a new employee population can pay attention to some of those insights. And some of the ones that stuck out to me is like, what is success in college? If achievement is, I believe you said like academic achievement was kind of a rising trend. What does that mean kind of for our employers that might be thinking, how does academic achievement eventually translate to the workplace? When I think about screen time, and you said like kind of the digital space that they occupy, it's much more than just they're looking to buy things, it's how they're connecting. And so like, how does that impact people trying to recruit Gen Z? Like these are just my like immediate kind of musings and riffings. And then this idea of investing in money, right? And wanting resources and understanding how to kind of financially prepare. And there's different ways in which I think companies can assist with that. So I think my question really is, from the insights that you all have generated from this study, what are the things that people who want to attract, hire, and retain Gen Z professionals, what are the things they need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think Gen Z graduates look for a lot of things when looking for a job. So when it comes to like getting their attention, I feel like there's a couple things that companies should be aware of and keep in mind. In our survey, we asked like for brands to make a meaningful social difference, what does Gen Z care about the most? And they care about ethical hiring policies or like the makeup of the workforce, providing mental health days for employees, and then also donating to causes. Those are the top 3 answers that came in from our study. And so I think to retain people generally, just providing an environment where they want to stay and they feel connected to the company and all the coworkers is super important. I'm going to shout out Wasserman for this one because I think they do a great job of, incorporating group chats or communities that you can join based on your interests or identities. And I think that's a great start for any company that is, looking to, explore this space. So we have a bunch of things like dog owner group chats to like documentary lovers, and also groups for like different ethnic groups that make up our, employee workspace. And so I think that that's a great way to, touch on all these points. And they also expect companies to, address D&I issues in their local communities and, nationwide. Our study says that, 71% of them like care and they want to see companies showcasing support and addressing these issues in their local communities. And so I think it's really important for companies and especially people that are hiring to really understand that and to, highlight those initiatives to attract those new hires and to showcase the support and the representation that they have in all the communities within their company. And I would say, like, if a company, say, like, maybe doesn't have that in place, I feel like there are ways to, obviously work on it. So I would say, like, advice would be to be sure that you can share ways of how the company is striving to get there, and that, showcasing that the work is being done, because Gen Z is really not afraid to take a stance on things that they care about and aren't afraid to call people out in companies and brands. So it's important to showcase that, your company's putting in the work to make a difference both inside and outside of the workplace to really, attract them and retain them and keep them for as long as possible.
I really liked what you said, Christina, about the idea of like inside and outside, right? So like the work needs to be done not just from like a HR marketing perspective, like we're a great place to work, right? Like there needs to be a lot more, I think, with this generation, because for lack of better words, like we know that Gen Z can kind of see through the BS, right? Like they can see through the marketing BS. Like you all can, in my opinion, you can sniff it out better than most generations can. And I think you bring up a good point of you have to be intentional about the sharing, and not just when we're trying to promote why this is a great place to work. Like it needs to be very authentic and very robust, and not for what can feel like that kind of that hidden motivation of painting a pretty picture. Like the picture actually needs to be pretty as it is, not doctored. And I think that that's something that there are some companies we know that do that really well. And then there's others that try to kind of mask what's going on behind the scenes. And I don't know what's going to happen to those companies, but that was something when you said both inside and outside, there's that link of truth and honesty. I think that we see that's really present with Gen Z job seekers, and those who are not even just job seekers, those who are like, am I going to be a consumer of this brand because they have bad employment practices? Maybe not. Or I know people have divested of different companies for different reasons because of their practices. And I feel like there's just less that companies can hide these days that can impact both their hiring, retention of employees, and their ultimate consumers. So I appreciate you sharing that. Based on this study, what are some expectations? These are the things that Gen Z is coming into their job search and their career preparation that they might expect of employers or potential employers.
The most important things when looking for a job, according to the survey, 33% really care about salary when choosing a job after college. I think this ties directly into like the investing aspect and money just really being at the forefront of a lot of decisions, especially with the economy now. And a lot of Gen Z, like myself personally, like I feel like have had moments where, you stress out and you are scared for what's to come, and the struggle to like afford things like rent and basic needs on top of having, spending money to hang out with your friends. So I know salary is a really big part of people's decisions. And I have a lot of friends who, chose to have a job where they maybe, make a lot of money but have really long working hours and value that aspect more than another. And then 30% choose jobs based on how well they fit the description. And I think this is a good baseline just to see what kind of positions are out there. But I found that they're not always representative of all the different opportunities. Because for me personally, I looked a lot on LinkedIn when I was searching for a job, and a lot of the job postings that have like entry level listed on the posting say that you need 5+ years of experience. Someone straight out of college isn't necessarily going to have that. And so it can be a little bit discouraging sometimes for someone trying to break out in the industry. That's definitely a baseline of how people decide. And then what was really interesting from this survey was that company culture and benefits were pretty low at 11% each, which I found really interesting because in my job search, I definitely prioritized company culture and also the benefits, because I knew that I was going to be living alone or like away from my family, and that I would be on my own insurance and things like that. And so I definitely think it's like obviously a case by case thing, but I was shocked to see that it was that low, especially because I think it's really important to enjoy, the workplace that you're in and enjoy the people around you as well. So that was really interesting. But in terms of prepping for a career search, in terms of like timeline, a lot of people start early in their senior year. 20% of students start their job search in their early senior year, and 18% start the summer after junior year and before senior year. And so the timeline, like is mostly around that time in their lives. And I definitely started fall of my senior year, which was technically my last semester because I graduated early. So I know my timeline was a little bit skewed, but I still felt a lot of pressure to find a job, even though I knew that I had a lot of time compared to like other people in my class. And in terms of how people are finding jobs, 59% of them utilize networking as a primary source for finding jobs. So going to conferences, utilizing, professors, career fairs, other mentors that they've had in the past. That's definitely the most popular option that people go for. And then 50% utilize LinkedIn and social media. I think that's definitely new in the sense that a lot of brands are starting to post on things like TikTok, being like, we're hiring. And a lot of people see it that way. And so I know some of my friends have definitely found jobs that they're interested in through, those brand handles. And then 42% rely on their internship. So going from that intern to full-time pipeline. I feel like personally, I utilized all of those options, really leaning into my connections and, talking to my professors for advice and all that kind of stuff for different opportunities. And also utilizing the people that I met throughout my internships. And I think like being very vocal about it eventually, got me to where I am today. And so I would say it's really important to support those people that are reaching out to you as someone that, is an employee at a company and someone reaches out to you that is really interested in a job position. But also if there's any, Gen Zers that are looking for jobs listening to this, I would say, reach out to as many people as you can because you never really know when those opportunities are going to come. And then in terms of location, the majority of the students wanted to live in a city after college. New York City was the most popular of our survey at 20%, and 16% wanted to work in a city but didn't have really a preference. And then in terms of like company size, the majority wanted a medium-sized company, so anywhere from 51 to 500 people. And so those are some of the things that Gen Z looks for when they're starting out their job search and career prep.
So there's something really interesting because as you're sharing kind of the things that like their expectations, right? Like what they're looking for, like obviously salary, like that matters. I think I was also shocked by the idea of benefits being so low. And I think that it might be a little bit of like, you might be a unique experience where you were potentially off your parents' like insurance earlier than others, but you also kind of know that benefits is a monetary game, right? So like paying for insurance through your employer is cheaper than paying for insurance elsewhere. And so like, I do find that interesting. Maybe that's just an opportunity for companies that are looking to attract salary driven young people like Gen Z or like monetarily driven young people of understanding and giving really good education about like the full scope of company benefits and how sometimes there are things that are included in those benefits that don't feel immediately directly financial, right? So like if your company's going to pay for your gym membership, that's potentially anywhere from $50 to $200 a month, right? That could be not coming out of your pocket. Same with health insurance. Having a really good company plan can save you money down the road. It's like not the sexiest version of a salary, but it does impact like your financial bottom line in general. So that might just be like companies that are listening, HR professionals that are listening, if you're out there, like let's help the young people understand that benefits are like not so sexy, but very important.
Very important. Yes.
So important. Right. And like those benefits, like I certainly have seen some really interesting benefits that have come out of like jobs of like certain companies will pay for your at-home work setup or if you're completely remote, like paying for lunch once a week, right? Like little things like that that do impact your bottom line. The other thing that really stuck out to me, and I don't necessarily know if it's shocking, but I do think it is a shift that we've gradually seen happen, is that for seniors or rising seniors, the job search is starting earlier than it was. I think previously, if seniors were graduating in the spring, they were doing a lot of the job searching in the spring. And it sounds like from what you're hearing in your survey and what you're understanding in the survey is they're really like, if they're graduating in the spring, they might be job searching in the fall or the summer, which feels almost a year prior to when they would start that job. And what I hear from that is Gen Z wants to have a plan. and they want to minimize the uncertainty of what could happen after graduation. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's really fair. I think it also depends on like the industry that you're trying to go into because I know some industries hire a lot sooner than others. Like I have a lot of friends in, the tech and like engineering spaces and a lot of them secured jobs, in their junior year of college through their internships or something like that. And as far as like my timeline with like marketing, it was much later. So I think that's also a thing. But yeah, I agree that, a lot of college students just want to have that job security and, have that path after graduation because graduating college is scary and, you don't have school anymore unless you're going to grad school. And like it's a really stressful time for students. And so I think it's very fair to say that, having a job lined up and having that pathway just helps with a lot of the uncertainty that, comes with growing up and moving on from a big chapter of your life.
Absolutely. So I've got, two more questions. One more really focused on people that are potentially wanting to hire or attract Gen Z. So this is really if you had the ability to give advice to HR professionals, let's just say that. What would you suggest to organizations that want to create a positive workplace experience for Gen Z employees?
Yeah, I think it's important to create a really positive and supportive work environment for Gen Z. Obviously, with like COVID happening, a lot of us had to go through college through that and a lot of other things going on in the world. And so just providing support is really essential, like providing resources like, mental health days we talked about, different D&I initiatives, and just a positive work environment of like, being flexible and offering the resources for people that need it. And I feel like we're constantly learning or wanting to find new ways to learn and absorb information. So it's like, if you give it to us, like we'll be able to adapt. And so just providing that good environment for us is honestly key. Because Gen Z is really passionate and driven and outspoken. And I think that if you give them the tools, that they will succeed and put in their best efforts and perform in whatever role that they're in. And so providing resources like that will just better them as an employee and help them like help you pretty much. And so I think it's important to, provide those resources. I guess this falls under benefits, but just providing ways to make the work experience better in terms of like support and different resources that they can utilize when or if they need the support.
I really appreciate that because I think some people could listen and say, oh, Gen Z needs all this support to even just get their job done, right? And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that what Gen Z is asking for in terms of support, guidance, resources, training actually is a cry for give me the things and the training I need to be eventually autonomous and resilient, right? Because
Yeah.
I think Gen Z is actually quite tough. They just want to do a good job and they don't want to waste their time guessing if it's a good job.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. I think like also our generation, like we just learned how to set really good boundaries for ourselves individually and like watching other generations go through what they've been through. It's like we know when to say yes and when to say no. And I think that some people might take that as, we're being lazy or something like that, but I think that we just have standards and boundaries and we're very strong about them and I think that that's a good thing. And I think that eventually it creates for an environment where all of us can really enjoy, what we're doing on a day to day and, eventually like thank ourselves in the future for creating that, really nice environment for us to all be in. Um, because I think like you said, like if you give us the tools, like we're gonna put all of our, 100% effort into it and perform really well. And so I think that that's just super important.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a really I think it's really healthy, actually, that Gen Z is like, I can't commit to something if I don't have the things I need to be successful in it. And playing the guessing game and trying to figure it out is not going to be conducive for your efforts, right? And so I think that there's something that other generations can look to that of, I don't think Gen Z is being needy and desiring support and resources. I think they're being smart and planning ahead and saying, if I'm going to give it 110% or 100%, I need X, Y, and Z to do that effectively.
Right.
And so it's just asking for what you want and then not sacrificing your values, which I don't see a problem with it at all. So we got to look to the younger generation to help us think about work a little bit more healthy. So Christina, our time is almost to the end. And I don't really let anybody get out of this podcast without answering my favorite question. And what is your favorite thing about your Gen Z peers and kind of the Gen Z that you get to study in your work and help kind of provide a voice to through what you do at Wasserman NextGen? What's your favorite thing?
Yeah, it's really awesome because my job, allows me to learn more about my generation, but also like collaborate with, my friends who are also part of this generation. But I just really love how we're really proactive in creating that better environment for ourselves in the future. And we're outspoken about the topics that we care about and that we're passionate about. I think that that's really great of us as an entire generation that, we value that in ourselves. I also just love how creative this generation is, whether it's in like a traditional art sense or even through like videos and humor, like on TikTok or like Instagram. I think that a lot of us in our generation use it as a sense of, finding community and bringing a light to something during a dark time, or, just using humor to connect with people, I think is a really strong thing. And I think our generation does it really well. And I think like through engaging with people on social media and in person, I think that no matter like where you're from, like you can always find something that, you've seen before, you have experienced before. And I think that that's a really cool thing and inspires me to explore new things and, share them with the world too. And so I just really love how, we're not afraid to show like who we are, and we do it in a really fun and engaging and really like artistic, creative way.
I appreciate that. I think Gen Z is serious about the things they know they need to be serious about, but don't take themselves too seriously about the things that they're allowed to be silly about. So again, per usual, these young people are helping us find balance. Well, Christina, thank you again so much for being here, sharing some of the insights about what you do and kind of the work that you all at NextGen are helping brands and companies better understand this generation and other generations. But if the listeners want to keep up with you and the work that you are doing, what's the best way that people can follow along with some of the great work that you are doing at Wasserman NextGen?
Yeah. Well, I would recommend following Wasserman NextGen at WasNextGen on social media, on all platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. That's where we always post about our work and all the great things that we're doing. We highlight a lot of our students and influencers that are a part of our programs and just bringing in a new set of, community members to this fantastic community that we've built up. So I would recommend that people check that out, and also our website. So, yeah.
Well, wonderful. Everyone, I'll be sure to include those links that if you would like to follow along and learn more about the great work they're doing at NextGen. But Christina, thank you again so much. It's been fantastic to learn from you.
Thank you so much for having me. I had such a great time talking about this.
Another thank you to Christina for bringing such data-informed insights into the conversation. It's one thing to observe behavior, and another to use data to measure it and make changes. The work that Wasserman NextGen is doing is helping companies and organizations not only better connect with their consumers, but better understand their future and their current Gen Z employees. While it can be easy to write off differing perspectives from other cohorts, it's important to recognize that changing these perspectives is very difficult, if not an impossible feat. So the best thing that companies and organizations can do is listen and do their best to adapt differing perspectives if they want to effectively engage members of Gen Z or any other generational cohort. If we're willing to listen, understand, and validate perspectives that are different than our own, it's much easier to work together to create meaningful and engaging workplace experiences. And luckily, there are groups like Wasserman NextGen that are doing great work to capture the perspectives of Gen Z. There are more great episodes and guests coming up in season 6 that you likely don't want to miss. I'm not going to tell you to live your life, but subscribing is a great way to be sure that you don't miss any new episodes when they become available. So if you haven't yet, now is a great time to hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And while you're at it, share this episode with a friend or a colleague. You know my preference, the more the merrier, and the more the listeners, the more learners, which is my favorite. And I'm always looking for new topics to explore and guests to chat with. If you have a suggestion of a topic or a guest, I now have a pitch form on my website, so you can just share it directly with me. You can find that form at meganmgrace.com/podcast. That's MEGHANMGRACE.com/podcast. And if you want to hang out, you can also find me on Instagram, Threads, and LinkedIn at meganmgrace. And I couldn't wrap this one up without a thank you to Leah Kramer, the Gen Zer behind the scenes, editing this podcast and bringing it to life. Thank you, Leah, for all that you're doing. And one more thank you for you. Thanks for stopping by for this episode and this season so far. Let's continue the conversation, and we'll chat soon.